Hello, hello. Hey, game addict. Morning. Well, morning for me. Hey, the Hanifer. How you going? All right, let's just let me just finish setting up here, and we get started. I have a bit of a mess here today. All right, can you hear me all right? Can you see the screen? Everything is good to go? Hey, Khalil, how you going? What will you teach us today? Hopefully something. that is my aim. Hopefully something. But today we're gonna start something new, something brand new. Let's just give it a couple minutes, and I'll show you what the idea is. I don't know if I don't know how much can we get done today. Probably this project will go for a few streams, maybe more than two. But I want to show you kind of like the entire workflow in a way, the sculpting workflow, and I want to show you a bit of the way that I think about using the processes inside ZBrush. So hopefully that will teach you something. Everything is good, great. Hello everyone. Hi from France. Sorry for my English. C'est pas problème. Hopefully I said that right. Great. C'est pas grave. C'est pas problème. Good to have everyone here. Alrighty. So let me just show you first. Oh, before I get started, I'm already using the latest version of ZBrush. Well, I've been using the latest version of ZBrush for a while, but the latest update, I guess. So the 2019.1. If you haven't seen this or you haven't checked that out, let me just show you. Just go to the ZBrush Central forum, and it's the first tile here in the top row, and it has the awesome image from Marlon. Yeah, so you just go here, and it's a free update, 2019.1, and it fixes a few bugs. So hopefully I haven't tested the booleans, but everything else seems to be working fine. One of the biggest things, I guess, from this update is the split screen, which is, it just added a great level of functionality, and it's just going to enhance different workflows. So it's just great. So just in case you haven't heard it, is in here, ZBrush Central, and you can just download the latest version. One of the things, like I said, is the split screen. So if you have more than one subtool, let me just do something obvious for you to see. So if you go to the transform palette, you have this split screen, which if you enable, then you'll have one split screen, so two screens, and then you'll be able to kind of like use references. It basically works on the subtool that you have selected. So the one on the right will be the one that you select. So I'll be working on the sphere here, but then if I want to make, for example, this sphere kind of like this shape, then I have to have it in the same tool as a different subtool, and then I can just play around with it and try to get it to the right shape. But it is really good. So that's just here under the transformation palette, in case you were wondering. All right. So that's one thing that I want to get out of the way. Great. All right. So let me show you. I did a silly sketch. It's just a horrible thumbnail based on a reference that I saw on an image on the internet, on a photograph. So obviously this is horrible, but it's what I want to show you with this is that this is kind of like the first thing that I do when I start a project. Like it is just an idea that I have in my head, and I just put it down in the roughest form. And again, this is just a thumbnail, doesn't have any detail or anything, but it's something to, it's kind of like making a mental note, but putting it down in paper just to remind myself of what I want to do. So this is kind of like the thing that I want to start working on. It's kind of like a creature. Imagine, I don't know if you guys are familiar with something that I started last year called the the odd spirits of set. I'll show you later, but the idea is that it's another of those creatures that could live in that world. I'll show you in a bit, but I just want to do a little bit of the what I do first, which is the feature mapping. Actually, let me just show you this thing first, in case you haven't seen it, so that you know I can give you some context of what I'm doing. So if you go to the ZBrush Guide's website, there is this page. It's just a course. It's about, I forgot how many hours of content, but it's just a short course, a very fast-paced course, where I teach you how to work with clothes and drapery, and how to create these basically. So I'll give you the base mesh, kind of like this creature, and then you can work on the. I walk you through how to create all of these clothes in ZBrush. So it's just about ZBrush sculpting. All of these clothes is created in ZBrush, so no Marvelous Designer or anything. It's just pure sculpting in ZBrush. Yeah, you can go here and learn about it. It has about 26 videos, or 25 plus a bonus one. So anyway, the point here, what I want to show you, it comes also with some resources that I'm probably going to be using, like this. Look at this brush. It's just, I'll show you in today's, if we get to it, I'll show you today how it works. But my point is that this is, the idea with this is like, it's kind of like a little world where these creatures all live in it. So it's called the Odd Spirits of Set. And the point is that, what I'm trying to do with this, I started it last year, but what I'm trying to do is create a full character for each course, or for each tutorial basically, but each character would have a completely different set of tools that I use. So in this character, I concentrated on the clothes and creating that. So the sketch that I did, that I just showed you, the idea is to use a bunch of different processes in ZBrush to show something else. But as you can see, it has kind of like the same feeling, and the idea as well is to have these creatures that have like horns that are kind of like nature spirits, and they all have kind of like these humanoid masks, to try to be less frightening to the humans or something. So it's like a fantasy type of world, but they all have specific elements that kind of like connect them together, which they're very easy to spot in terms of what they are. Like those different elements, like the masks is one of probably the main element. The horns as well, different type of horns, and some assets that they might wear, kind of like tribal type of thing. So anyway, that is just to give you some context of what I'm trying to do with this guy. And yeah, we're gonna start with this. Hopefully, get the blocking done today, and I'm gonna do a bit of feature mapping, and I'm gonna explain what that is. But because I think that's gonna help help some of you guys to get started with a project that might look a little bit overwhelming and a bit too complex. So let me just see what the chat says. Multiple views like in Maya? No, that is just a split screen, and it's based on only one tool. So it's just gonna show you all the subtools that you have versus the one that you have selected. It's kind of like a solo mode. Yeah, that's probably the best way to understand it. It's like a solo mode in one side of the screen and the rest of your subtools in the other one. Khalil is asking, will I create this in 3D? Yeah, that is the idea, to create this character in 3D in ZBrush with a bunch of different processes so that you can see. Sketchy, that's it. Bought it the other week. This is really awesome. Learned so much. Thank you, Pablo. I'm really glad that you feel that way. Great to hear that. Don't forget that I like to. When I put things out there, if you finish the course and you do something and you actually get something out of it, like you think is valuable, feel free to share what you make out of that, and I'm really happy to share it as well. So instead of spending a lot of money on Marvelous Designer, just purchase the course. You will learn a lot. Thanks, mate. All right, so cool. I'm yet to find is the, yep. All right, so let's get started with this so that we can actually do some sculpting in ZBrush. So what I'm talking about here with the feature mapping is something that I also do at this very stage, which is extremely rough. It's not even a sketch, it's just a quick thumbnail. And the feature mapping is, if you want to learn more about this specific thing or this feature mapping, is, I mean, I don't know if it's called feature mapping, it's just a term that I came up with because it's just creating a map of the features that I might use in ZBrush. I did speak about this feature mapping in the presentation that I did in the ZBrush Summit last year. So at the beginning of the presentation, if you go and check it, it's in YouTube and it's also on the ZBrush guides. You can learn more about how I did that or how I approached it. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown of what it is. Let me just select a different color. So the idea with the feature mapping, at least what I do, is take something extremely rough like this and then kind of like highlight or create an outline of the areas of the different assets or the different parts of the body or parts of the character that I want to use a specific feature in ZBrush. So the most obvious ones, I guess, let's go ahead and start with the, let's put this underneath here. Alright, so the most obvious one would be all of these kind of like a fur coat, which again, because this is extremely rough and we will be doing tweaks on the design in ZBrush, this is kind of like a rough pass to indicate what this material could be or what this whole thing could be. But this is something that is really helpful, especially when you have like a big project that looks very complex. This helps you to simplify things a little bit and just see it with, you know, not being overwhelmed by what it is. So this might look too complex to create, but then you start doing the feature mapping and simplifies it. So this one is obviously fiber mesh, or I reckon this is probably the easiest way to do fiber mesh. Alternatively, kind of like a plan B would be a nano mesh, if you want something a little bit more stylized, right, for those fur. All right. Let's do another one really quickly. So this is something that, I mean, you shouldn't spend too much time, but once you see the different blobs of color with little, kind of like the map really, then I reckon you'll feel more comfortable, you know, tackling these things. It gives you like a plan of attack really. All right, so I'm gonna tackle the body. So hopefully, yeah, today I will do a bit more of a sketching, sculpting session, not talking too much. All right, so let's say this is part of the body. All right, so this one is kind of like a normal approach to creating a character design, like a T-pose type of thing. So for this, I would use C-sphere or C-spheres, for example. Probably this is the easiest way to do it. Maybe actually the claws of this character. Maybe he doesn't have fingers. Again, this is something yet to be defined and to be explored within ZBrush. This is just very rough, but maybe this character has this kind of like claws for fingers instead of being fully, you know, mobile fingers. So this could be primitives with gizmo, right? So these type of things. Let's do a couple more. I mean, this is something that I don't do with every single project, but when they're very complex, I found that this is really, really helpful in terms of simplifying the approach to it. All right, so this kind of like secondary coat, which is kind of it could be like a leather, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see what this could be, but it's just kind of like a cloth. So this one would be, let's think about it. So with this approach, we can start using Dynamesh, right? Just to block it out. Once we have the blockout, we can do, let's see, we can mask out some areas. We can make it a thin mesh, so like a one-sided mesh, and then we can use ZBrush. and that should be good, just to set this blocking. And just to finish up, let's do two more colors. All right, so these little things here that could easily be some IMM curve. That's an easy one. For the mask, this one is kind of like the more feature asset of this character, just because, you know, it is a character and we tend to focus on the face. So this is the mask is the face really. So this one could be, we can use polygroup it. Polygroup it is the 2019. I think it was 2019. Now I forgot. Yeah, I think it was the latest version of ZBrush that added this plugin. So we use polygroup it, and we can use panel loops. We'll have some fun with this one because we can do maybe 2 or 3, and maybe this could be like a printable thing, and you can just interchange the mask. Why not? We can dream about this in this very early stage. And for the horns, I reckon they could be easily done with primitives. All right, same with this. It will be kind of like another horn, maybe. All right. The rest of the things, the rest of the other assets, you know, these type of things, they also could be primitives, and the little line here, that could be part of the IMM brush. So it looks a little bit messy, but hopefully you can see, if you see this as just block of colors like that, it would give you like a map on or a plan of attack that's going to be easier to, I feel that it's less overwhelming when you have a complex project. So this one will give you an idea of what to try, or what to try first when you get to ZBrush. And if it works, then you stick with it. If not, then you try something else. And obviously, if you're getting started with ZBrush and you might not know what these features are, or maybe you don't think you can achieve the same result or what you're envisioning with these processes, then that's all good. Like, you can just set it to all Dynamesh, and then as you progress, then you start mapping it differently. But that is roughly the idea. All right, hopefully that makes sense. And let's go ahead and start with ZBrush. See if you guys have any questions so far. All good? Mosh Joy says could be good likeness sculpt, having it set on an angle of a reference photo while still sculpting on the other screen. It's basically for scan data. So if you have scan data of an actor, for example, or you download like a 3D scan, that would be, if you're talking about the split screen, that is ideally what you would like to do. ZLeo63, the chat is very small for me, not serious, but if you can put big a little bit, please. Yeah, that's something that I asked before. The thing is, I cannot, if I make it bigger, it's just gonna cover most of the screen. So I think I just rather get rid of it altogether. Hey Pablo, can you get the course when in my country they ban international credit cards? Yeah, I don't know how to do that, unfortunately. I just put it in this in the service that I use for sharing these type of things, and I think you can pay with PayPal. You don't have to use credit card. Will you be making an actual face under the mask? Yeah, but it's gonna be like a creature, and everything is gonna be covered, so not a lot of details. You do all these for every project? No, like I said, it is mostly just to give you an idea of how to tackle complex projects. It just helps me to organize myself a little bit, and it, in terms of productivity, also helps me to stay focused on something. For example, if you say for the third coat you're gonna use fiber mesh, and you're kind of like comfortable with that, when you get to that point of the project, then you're not gonna be playing around with possible different features, or like say, oh, I'm gonna try a bunch of curves or IMM brushes and see if that gives me something. At least you don't waste time on that, because you just jump straight into that feature and you just get it done. So in terms of productivity, I like to do that just to give me kind of like a constraint of what are the features that I need to use. Gang of Ninjas. Wow, hi Pablo, I didn't know you stream. I'm searching up all your past episodes. Great. Yeah, so it's been a recent thing, and I took a break last month because I went on holiday, so I'm back this month. Cool. All right, mate. Let's go ahead and get started, because we haven't done anything in ZBrush. So we have the quick sort of like setup. I'm gonna start with the body, because that's gonna give us the structure and the the proportions and everything, right? To kind of like further design this in ZBrush. So like I said, I'm gonna start with C-spheres. Let's go ahead and change that to a C-sphere. And I absolutely love this feature in ZBrush. I like to play, when I'm using C-spheres, I like to play with a small brush size. Make sure that I have symmetry enabled. And I'm just gonna, this is the first, when I'm doing a character, this is the first thing that I do with C-spheres. So I make sure that I go right to the center, and then you see that ZBrush kind of like snaps these 2 points. Create a sphere at the top and one at the bottom, right? So the reason I do this is because the center one, or like the C-sphere in the center, you see from here. Hopefully this is going to be an obvious thing, but so the one in the middle is kind of like the beginning of the chain of C-spheres. So you'll see these little cones. Those are indicators of the direction, right? So having this second sphere here and this third C-sphere here means that I can just go anywhere that I want from this point and anywhere that I want from this point. So for a character, this is ideal, because you can obviously take the legs from here, and then the arms and the and the head. It doesn't have to be like that. You can just leave it as it is and just take the legs from here, but it's just something that I got used to when I started using C-sphere. So that is how I work. All right, so let's just go ahead and create a couple more. Oops, make sure draw is enabled. Couple more here. This one would be kind of like the shoulders. Another one here in the middle for the neck. This is kind of like the beginning of the neck. Maybe let's undo that. It's gonna be a bit bigger. Then another one for the length of the neck, and this one will be the face or the head. We will tweak this later. This is just to get us started. I'll do another one here for the feet of the character, another one for the wrist. Right. So with this little, this weird little thing, we can just get started. I'm gonna turn off perspective so that I can see an orthographic view. I'm gonna take the legs and I'm gonna push them down. And this guy's gonna be kind of like a short dude. I can also select this scale and just start scaling things a bit. Like the head is too small. Let's see what we can do. I'm thinking that maybe because the face is like so close, I mean the head is so close to the body, we might not need an extra C-sphere. So I'm gonna hold the Alt key and delete that one, and then I'm gonna take this little one and make it the head. So I'm gonna scale that one. All right, so that is closer to the idea that we have in the sketch. All right, I'll do the same thing for the hands or for the arms. And these two, I mean, the first one is just where the shoulders are, which they could be a little bit higher. And then the second one, or the second C-sphere from the arms, that is just to determine the length of the arm, and then we come back and tweak the shapes. So all I'm doing at this point with the C-spheres is determine the proportions and the relationship between the upper parts of the body, the lower parts and the limbs and things like that. So I'm probably gonna have like longer arms, and I'm gonna start with a T pose so that I can pose it a little bit easier. Alright, let's add a couple more so that this doesn't look as horrible. So I'm gonna set the elbow right there, and as well as the knees. So the knees might go a little bit higher. Alright, and now that we have the knees, we can just fine tune this. This is one of the things that I see sometimes, kind of like a mistake, or not a mistake, but just something that you will get to figure it out as you progress in your sculpting. And I see this in some of my students. They put the knee, for example, like this, because it makes sense. You kind of like bend the knee in that way, and if you're walking, this is how it looks. But that just gives the feeling that the character is sort of like doing squats or something like that. Whereas if you're standing straight, the shape from the side of the leg looks kind of like this. So it just goes inside. It kind of like locks in the knee, and that's how you stand. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's just a little extra tip, which I like to do at this point with the C-spheres, and that also helps with the curvature and the line of action. Even though this is just a T-pose, it helps with to understand the shape of the character. I'm gonna push the neck a bit lower, and I'm probably gonna scale this up a tiny bit. So remember, this is not necessarily a humanoid character. It's more like a creature. Again, it's a spirit. It's like the odd spirits of Z, or part of that series. So all I'm doing here is refining the proportions and the way that things are placed together. In this case, I can just push this thing together, and I can add a few more of these C-spheres. Let me actually just scale the chest a bit, because that is kind of like an important one. I mean, an important size to get right before we get into the more details, or adding more details to the C-spheres. So if I add a few, let's say for example here, just to give a hint of the muscles of the arm. This guy is not going to have much muscles, and it's not a humanoid form, or I mean it's humanoid, but it's not human. So if I just add another one here and just scale this up, that kind of like gives you that idea of this forearm being a little bit thicker here, because of all the muscles in this area. And this is going to be let's just add one here for the biceps, for example, and then just push this one back, and now you have a more realistic shape for the arm. Not realistic, but you know what I mean. It's there, right? Maybe this is too much. I mean, this character, the idea is that it's kind of like a thin creature, and we'll create. Let's do the same thing here at the bottom. So I just created a few there. Just clicking with the draw, and then with the scale, we can just scale these ones down, and then we can just reposition them a bit. So this C-sphere, actually let's make the knee a bit smaller. So this C-sphere would be kind of like the calves, and it's too big. But I really like using these C-spheres because it just allows me to play with the proportions quite a bit, and just rotating things around just to make sure that I get the proportions right and the silhouette of the character is working. You can read it. You can also just change the material. I don't have a particular good one here, but I can just go to black, and I can just set the background to white, get rid of the floor, and you can just play around with this and see if the silhouette is working. Everything is pretty blobby at the moment, but you have an idea of how these might look once you turn this into a workable mesh. Okay, let me just go back. Okay, and those are like little macros that I created so that I can go back and forth between the silhouette and checking silhouette and things like that. Now for let's do the hands. That's a fun one. Let's create a new one. So this sphere, the previous one is kind of like the wrist. This second one is kind of like the palm of the hand. And once we have this, we can create the fingers. So I'm gonna do. Let's go ahead and do one like here. So that's gonna be the thumb, and this guy's gonna have, I don't know, maybe 3 fingers, or maybe 2 fingers. Let's make it interesting. And let's just add another one here, another one here. Oops. And another one here. Let's do a quick save just in case. All right. So we have the beginning of the hand, or the beginning of the fingers here, right? And this second one is kind of like where the finger is gonna end. So it's a similar process what I did with the arm. I establish the beginning of the arm first, like the shoulder. Then I set the wrist, and then determine the length, and then I put C-spheres in between. So I can just take this one. This is gonna be the pinky. He only has 2, but you know, the pinky finger. Then I have this one, and then the thumb, right? And then I can obviously play with the, you know, the position of this, so it looks a little bit better. But you'll see how fast this is, just coming up with a character idea, and then you can just tweak the volumes and start the sculpting. So like I said, I probably won't get to do a whole lot today. Just if I finish with the basic blockout of the main things, I'll say it's a good progress. It's hard for me to do it at a realistic pace when I'm talking. So I'm just gonna try to do it as fast as I can, while I'm also giving you a bit of the the process. I'm gonna click on draw again, and I'm gonna set the 2 C-spheres. So 1, 2, 1, 2 for the phalanges. Another one here, right? And I don't mind these fingers to be kind of like fat fingers. We'll reduce that later on with we tweak them with the sculpting, but as a way to get us started, I think they work fine, especially because when we start smoothing things out, obviously if you don't use the alternative algorithm, it's gonna shrink things. So I think it's fine. Just tweak the thumb. Cool. So now that I can see it from the distance, maybe the hands are too small. Look a little bit ridiculous. So this is another thing why I like to work with C-spheres. You can then bring in the Gizmo 3D and scale things out. But with C-spheres, what you can do is select the scale and select the connection between the 2 C-spheres, and just scale the whole thing. Right. So let me just show this quickly. So you have one C-sphere here, and then the second one here, and then there is a connection between the 2, right? So if you select scale, click on this one, click and drag, then ZBrush is going to scale from this point onwards. So it's going to scale the entire hand. If you click just on the C-sphere, it's just going to scale this C-sphere, and everything else is going to be left alone. So right, so this is scaling the entire hand, and that is another reason why I created a separate C-sphere. So one is for the wrist, and the other one is for the entire hand, so that I can control the scale. Otherwise, if I would have just left this one, look, this is what's happening. So I can only just inflate this bit. Right, so here's another. That's the reason why I did that. That's too much. All right, so this is why I like this, just to play around with finding the right balance. That's all I care at this point, right? And you can do the same thing for the entire arm. Let's say that my arm feels a little bit short here. I can just scale that up like that. Same with the legs, and can keep playing with it. All right. So let's do a quick save. See if there is any questions about this so far. Oh, hang on, because I missed a few. Cool. So the Hanifa, they banned PayPal too. I think we'll stick with live streaming only. Sorry to hear that. And to me, if Pablo could have a baby with Michael Pavlovich, I would like to. That's fair enough. I don't know if it's gonna happen. Biologically, it's a bit complicated, but Michael is a good-looking dude. Hi Pablo, hola. Al hacer tus modelos, ¿te basas en alguna referencia o salen directamente de tu imaginación? Gracias. So, CG Botia is asking if I use any reference for my model. So if I just come up with, so I just collect a bunch of references basically and photos, and I just grab ideas of what I like, and then I start with that, and then I keep refining the process. For this guy that I have here, I'm showing you, if in case you haven't seen it, this is what we did at the beginning of the stream. Just a very rough, hang on. So a very rough thumbnail. This is just an idea, it's not the sketch or anything. And then I do a feature mapping just to have an idea again of what features I could use in ZBrush. And this is kind of like what I'm using as a base for this character. So as I've said before, I like to sketch and design directly in 3D in ZBrush. So in a piece of paper or in Photoshop, I just do a quick sketch, and then in ZBrush, I refine that idea as I, once I have access to the 3D-ness and the volumes, pardon me, then I can decide whether or not they're working fine. And that is, I don't have the particular skills that someone like Shane Olson or Polygon, those guys that create like super accurate and nice representations of the 2D sketches in 3D. That to me is like really awesome. But I prefer to just start with a rough idea in 2D and then continue the refinement of the actual design in 3D. So I don't know if that answers your question. Diego Muñoz, hi Pablo, greetings from Peru. Hola Diego, what would you say is the best pose for sculpting a character and why? Depending on what you want. If you want to create like a concept, most of the time, 90% of the time, I would start with a T-pose or like a relaxed version of the character, and that is just because it's going to be easier to pose it, and because I work with symmetry. If you want to do something like a more dynamic pose, and you're happy to work with sculpting asymmetrically, I would say start with a T-pose or a symmetric pose that is closer to what that pose is going to be. So let's say, to give you an example, I think I've talked about this before, but if you're doing like an archer, right? Someone that is taking a crossbow or whatever, and it's going to be like in this pose, I would try to set the T-pose or the sculpting pose to be closer to the most, to the hardest part of the body that is going to be posing. I don't know if that makes any sense. So let's say if you have if you have the left arm stretched and the one and the right one like this, the hardest one to pose would be the right one, because you have to think about the contraction of the muscles, and a lot of the geometry here in the biceps and the elbow is going to be contracted, right? So I would create a pose that is kind of like in between the two, between these two arms, and then it's going to be easy to just, oh, here we go. This is, I've been talking too much, so ZBrush just gave me the what is the name, the wallpaper. All right. I don't know if that makes any sense, but hopefully that gives you an idea. Most of the time I do just a T-pose so I can play with symmetry. Do you sculpt every time in T-pose if you have? Yep, so that's pretty much what I just mentioned. What about the twisted muscles? It would be better when using a relaxed muscle. So in this case, the muscles are twisted, right? But that is, I'm thinking to have this character kind of like in that pose anyway. So if you think about it, this arm, right? So let's say that you have the biceps here. It's a horrible biceps, but you get the idea, right? These muscles are twisted, so right? So if I want to make like a, a pose that the muscles are not twisted or the muscles are not contracted or whatever, I will probably make the hand like this. I don't know if that makes any sense as well. I'm just talking a bit of rubbish today, but I think you get the idea. This is just thinking about how the character is going to be at the end on the final pose. In fact, I'm thinking that for the clothes and all the asymmetrical details, I might just pose the character first and then bring in, sculpt everything on top of that. But let's move a little bit faster here because, hang on. So Diego says, I'd like to know how to choose the best pose for each character. If you don't know exactly what the final pose is going to be, I would recommend just a T-pose. That's the easiest way. Just because, yeah, the T-pose is like the safest way that is just going to give you good results regardless of the pose. You can just, oops, don't know what happened there. I'm not sure if I want to do fingers like this. I'm just going to undo that. I'm just going to do one, just to have an indication of the toes. But yeah, I don't know if I'm going to go for this. And the scale is a little bit off, but I think we'll just tweak that later. All right. I think we are getting closer. Maybe I'll just do one for the belly. So in between these two, remember the one right in the middle is kind of like the beginning of the chain. I'm going to create one here. And I'm just going to push this one forward. So you'll see this is creating kind of that more natural S pose of the body. Right, so here we have the column, all the spine. So that is what I'm trying to do with the C-spheres here. Pretty simple. Let's do a quick save. Why now we see a pose in industry just for motion capture? I'm not sure what you mean. Like if you mean that most characters that you see in the industry are like in a T-pose, that is just because that's the easiest way to create the rig, just because it's symmetrical and you don't have contractions of the muscles and stuff like that. So it is the easiest to create a rig and then animate it. Don't know if that answers the question. All right, so let's move a little bit faster. We've been talking a lot, and I want to do more blocking. So now that I have this, let's just go ahead and click on Adaptive Skin, and I'm gonna click Preview. This is just gonna give me a Dynamesh preview, so I don't want that. I wanna, the traditional skinning approach. So I'm gonna take the Dynamesh resolution, set it to 0, click Preview, and that is actually not too bad. So I'm gonna click Make Adaptive Skin. Go here because ZBrush creates a new tool. Here we go. I'm gonna copy that, go into C-sphere, paste that. So the only reason I do this is because I like to have the C-sphere and the skin in the same tool, so I can save only one tool, and if I want to change things, I can just go back and do it. And also because then you can just split it and do like a rigging just with the C-spheres to pose the character. I'm not sure if that's what I'm gonna use, but we'll have a look. New folder. I'm gonna call this Originals, and I'm gonna put the C-sphere here. And I'm going to create another one called Blocking, or BL. So that's where the skin lives. I'm going to put the originals at the top and turn that off. Alright, so now I have this skin, and that's kind of like the basics. I can bring in the Move brush, make sure that AccuCurve is selected. Also, I'm going to bring in the Smooth brush and make sure that I have the intensity lower. So when I do this this process, it's not gonna scale things too abruptly. And I'm gonna just start moving these polygons with the Move brush to fine tune the shape. So this is really good at this point, just because we have so little I mean, we don't have a lot of polygons, and so we don't have a lot of control of like details and stuff like that. So you're not too worried about creating details, and that is a good thing at this point. So it's very rough what I'm doing here, just setting up some volumes. And most of this body is going to be covered by the rest of the assets that we're doing. But you'll see I have a kind of like an indication of where the pectorials are. Maybe just tweaking the rib cage a bit, especially here at the back that everything is kind of like blobby. So I'm just going to refine this a bit. And this is not going to be, you know, anatomically perfect. This is just a fantasy type of character. But you know, referring back to anatomy and making sure that it is working, that's what is one of the things that's going to make it more believable that it could exist at least. So it doesn't have to be realistic, but it has to be believable. I need to be able to trick you into believing that this character could exist. And the reason I'm using the move brush with the AccuCurve is that at this point it allows me to have a more sharper, just a sharper way to move things around. Oops. All right. Just bring these two closer together. And let's play around with I think this guy needs to be a little bit fatter and, you know, wider. So let's just do that. So you'll see with just a low resolution or just a few polygons, it's just way easier to manipulate the shapes. Okay, and maybe the head could be like that, and then we can just play with the size of the mask actually. I'm just gonna need to, and I'm thinking after this step I'm gonna split things up, and then I'm gonna work on the face or the head separately from the body. Maybe we'll see what works best. Just gonna push this back a bit, and I'm gonna pull this just to give it an indication of the elbow here. And again, most of these things are going to be covered, but it's good to establish those landmarks. Let's do the hands really quickly. So as you can see, it's just the move brush and the smooth brush. And this is what I said at the beginning of making those fingers a bit fatter than what you want them to be, so that when you smooth them, you have more room to play with them. All right. I think we're getting there. Just smoothing out different areas, pushing this a bit. All right, cool. So I think we have a good rough blocking of this guy. Some polygons here are starting to get stretched, but this is where we can just do a quick series measure and, you know, reconstruct some of these volumes so that we have more topology to work with. So I'm just gonna duplicate this, put it inside the originals, so that again we have a duplicate of that. And in this one, I'm just gonna run a series measure just as it is. See what that gives us. Maybe just half of that. half of that actually, and one more. All right, that's not too bad. We have a base mesh. Let's see the chat. ¿Cuál es el programa para dibujar las explicaciones? CG Botia is asking what's this little software here. It's called Epic Pen. It's just something that sits on top of your screen, and you can just draw things. Epic Pen, that's the name. I see that in documentary of Weta Digital. Hey, say now we do with a pose, but I don't understand why. Okay, cool. Hey Bjorn, how you going? Diego, thanks Pablo. I was kind of crazy because I saw a lot of different poses. Some artists make their characters' legs stretch or flex, and I haven't figured the reason out. I'm still learning English. No worries. So, I guess. Alright, so one of the things that you will find probably, and don't quote me on this, I'm not 100% sure because I'm not a rigger, but I kind of like have an understanding of the theory behind it, just to when I'm setting up characters for rigging. The fact that you have the character in a relaxed pose, kind of like an in-between extreme poses, that is the preferred method, the preferred method for a rigger to put it together. That way, you have less stretching of the textures and the polygons in either direction. So if you have an arm that is fully stretched, then you're gonna have, when you do this, all of these the textures here and the polygons are gonna be stretched. If you have a character that is in this pose already, when you stretch your arm, then all the ones in here are gonna be stretched. So what you want is kind of like an in-between. So that's why you sometimes see characters not in a full T pose like that, but they're like slightly like an in-between. Don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of the idea. Hey Ashley, how you going? Good to have you here. I just realized that with the ZBrush I lost a bit of the fingers here, but I'm not too fussed because remember that the fingers are going to be kind of like these claws. So in fact we can just remove them a bit. I'm not fussed about this. Alright. So it has like these little stumps for hands, but that is closer to what I was envisioning anyway. And if you remember the sketch, so the fingers are going to be kind of like a hard type of like a nail or something. So I'm just thinking this could be the finger, like some claws here, the entire finger, so he cannot actually bend them, right? And then you have the hand here, and here's the thumb. That's what I'm thinking. It might not work at the end, but we'll give it a go. Alright, let's try to move a little bit faster here. Let's go ahead and start with the, let's leave this one as the blocking, maybe make him less fat here. And just give him a bit of a nicer bump here, because it's not good. Alright. So that's as a starting point. That's all right. We'll keep tweaking this. Let's go ahead and do maybe the horns and we'll start with the horns, right? So I'm gonna do a quick save here, and let's go ahead and start with the horns. And I think I'm gonna do a Dynamesh and then do a ZBrush on those. So no, actually I did that. We're gonna start with a primitive. So let's just stick with the plan. So I'm going to use a cube, turn on polyframe, go to initialize, and then I'm just going to play around with the cube. I'm going to increase this, or decrease it actually, and I'm just going to increase this, and I'm going to scale things. I'm going to scale the x-axis to 50, half the size, as well as the y-axis 50. So it's like longer in the z-axis, right? If I set this to 50, it's just going to be proportionally the same. So that is maybe a little bit longer. Let's do 25, 25. Okay, so we have this cube to start the construction or the base mesh for, or the primitive for the horns. We can change the count size. So let's say 3 will give you something like that. But I think let's go for 5. Yeah, 5 should be good. All right, so that is it. Let's go ahead and do a bit of twisting. We can do the twisting from here, so we can do this and get something already that looks pretty interesting. But I want to have more control over this with the gizmo, the deformers and the gizmo. So I'm going to leave this one as it is. Click Make Polymesh 3D. So now we have that as a, we can start moving things around. And what I'll do here is go to the gizmo, and I'm going to stretch this up so that I have, see, the idea here is that I want to have the size of these polygons to be proportional in terms of the y and the z axis, or the y and the x axis. So I'm going to try to make them squarish, and that is just scaling everything up, right? So somewhere there, right? And that is going to make it everything a little bit more proportional. So that's something that I can do. And also let's go ahead and bring in the C modeler, and I'm just going to delete some of these ones in here because they're too much. So I'm going to hover over this edge, right click, and I'm going to delete, or select delete, and I'm going to select edge loop complete, right? So I'm going to click here, delete that. I'm going to start from here and delete this too. All right, and maybe I can just select, right click on the edge, go to slide, and then just, oops, hang on a second, right click, slide, make sure that is the complete loop. There we go. Cool. So how are we with time? The first hour mark, we're getting closer. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing here. Right click, delete that one, that one, that one, that one, and that one, and then I just right click, slide. I reckon we can actually delete one more. Yeah, let's do that. Slide, move that one like this, and let's do the same thing here, just to be consistent. Slide. Alrighty, so we have a kind of like a clean topology to start with. Something that I like to do is create kind of like a revolving little detail, or just a detail that just goes around the horn, and we can do this in a couple ways. We have 5 sides, so I actually can just hold the Alt key and tag all these polygons, and I'm going to tag maybe just 2 sides. So I'm going to tag that side and this side. Let's see what that gives us. And the fact that we have 5 sides but we only do 2 details, it's going to make a nice kind of like a symmetrical shape. So I reckon that's going to be good. Let's go ahead and hover over this face, right click. Let me just change this so you can see a bit better. Right click, QMesh, polygroup all. In this case we tag the polygons, so it doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to extrude this a tiny bit, something like that. And then we can slide this a bit, like the whole edge, just to make it more pointy, like that. That's not too bad. Let's go back to the move brush, and we can just start tweaking this asymmetrically, I guess, with the smooth brush as well. Just smooth this out. I can also take the centerpiece here and then just push that up. Remember, I have the AccuCurve selected, so I can get these very pointy areas. So this is going to be the tip of this horn. I'm just smoothing things out. I don't want to do it too much because the real shape is going to be given by the deformer. So just want to not have a very obvious straight piece here. All right. Cool. So we have this bit with the extra. So if I subdivide this, you'll see we have these two details or more geometry here where we can do more details. So let's undo that. I don't want to subdivide it just yet. Actually, we can do it once more. So no, let's just leave it then. All right. So with this, let's go ahead and bring in the gizmo. And I'm going to click on this cog icon here, and I'll bring in all the deformers. So the first deformer that I want to use is probably the twist. So I want to get that twisting happening first, and then I'm going to use the taper deformer to make sure that I have a thicker part at the bottom and then like a very thin at the top of the horn. So twist, and the twist gives you these controls. If you just click on this and drag, you just push or rotate this thing around like so. I think I'm going to go for that, and then if you want more, then just click on this one and do the same thing in the same direction. All right. I'm just having a feeling that we might need more geometry because we're starting to get this deformation that I'm not necessarily happy with. So let's undo that, or we can just click on the cog icon and delete so it doesn't apply that deformation. I'm just going to divide it one more time and delete lower so we have more resolution and it's a little bit smoother. We will work on the sharpness when we get to the sculpting, but for the blockout we'll do that. Again, twist, push that up and push that up as well. Alright, we're still having a little bit of this, but we can just smooth that out later. Alright, so let's click on the cog icon, accept. We can actually start smoothing this a bit, and I'm just gonna follow one side just so that we can, this is kind of like the two sides of the horn, and the other side. So this is the side that is kind of like embedded, and this other side, what I can do is bring in the inflate brush and then just push this up a bit before I smooth that. So inflate and smooth, inflate and smooth. Here we go. So getting there, let's go ahead and bring in the polyframe so that we can see how much we are distorting the geometry. Bring in the gizmo, cog icon, and I'm going to use the taper deformer this time. So I'm going to push this down so that this one will control this part of the horn, and this one will control the thickness at the bottom. All right. So that's looking cool. Accept. And again, this is just the blocking. We will do more sculpting and tweaking later on. So we have the base of this horn, or the idea for this horn. Let's see what else we can do at this point. I reckon we can give it a bit of form, or like started to bend it a bit, because if you see the sketch, so we started with a primitive and then do a bit of Gizmo 3D. We're gonna get a bit of this curvature here, and that is also part of the Gizmo 3D. All right. So bring in the Gizmo, cog icon, whoops, and we can use either the bend curve or the arc. I think in this case bend arc is easier, because the bend curve you have more points if you want to have like an S shape, but the bend arc is just gonna be easier. I'm just having a look at the base, and I think this way we can, do this type of thing. So that will look alright. This one is really interesting because you can take this cone and actually move it around like this. If you're not in a straight angle, let me just undo that, because this is a cool tip. So if you turn off perspective, right? If perspective is off, you can just hold shift and then snap to a whatever angle you want. And if you take the green one, which is the one to create the arc, you will do this arc type thing in that axis, right? So it's straight, perfectly straight. But then if you're not in a straight axis, you can just move this around, and then it just bends things more interestingly, I guess. So that's a really cool thing. I want to undo that because I do want to, what was it? This angle, I think it was. No, this doesn't look as good here. So I'm just going to try to find an angle that the deformation looks alright. Alright, I think this one looks good. I don't want to do exaggerate it. And then you have the white ones, which is going to change the radius of these. Right? So that allows you to change that as well. And the yellow one, you can add additional twist to this. I think the twist was fine, but we can just fine tune the. Let's see. No, I think the twist is fine. Maybe just add it a tiny bit. Alright, click OK or toggle icon, accept, and that is it. We have the base mesh or the blocking of this horn. And because we have the polygroups, we can actually do another series of polygroups. I'm going to smooth this out. And we have this line, which is kind of like what I want. But for the most part, it's pretty smooth, pretty clean geometry. Just smoothing these areas. All right. So now what I would do is copy. Again, go back to my working file, paste that, and take that horn. I'm gonna rotate it, scale it, just blocking it out and set it in place. And I don't know if you guys have any questions so far. I'll just check the chat in just a minute. All right. So something like that. We can bring in the move brush with the AccuCurve and just fine tune the placement of this. And we'll have to do something with the head as well, just to make it feel part of this character. All right. Now if you want to have both so that you can judge the actual silhouette, then just click mirror and well, and that just duplicate that and have it within the same subtool. So that's pretty handy. Oops. If you want to work symmetrically, make sure once you do the mirror and well, you enable symmetry. Okay. So the blocking of the horns is there. Let's see. Let me have a quick sip, and if you have any questions, I can answer them right now. I'm doing work. I'm good doing work. Glad to hear that, Ashley. Great, great to hear that I'm keeping you company while working. Just a lot of faffing around today. Jose Lara, hey Pablo, do you always start with Z-spheres or do you use primitives too? I use a bunch of different things really. Today in this particular project, that's the idea, to show you a bunch of different processes. So I started with Z-spheres, but you know, nowadays I kind of feel comfortable with any other method. It's depending on the outcome. If I want to start with a cleaner topology, probably Z-spheres and then Z-remesher. That's probably one, but I tend to do, you know, Dynamesh, Sculptris Pro. It really depends on the project. A-cube, 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 Ashley. Every time you say A-cube, it's just all right. No, I'm just kidding. Mr. Manson, hey Pablo, do you know how to make a Grebel from scratch, as in a texture or like a texture map, or what do you mean? Just a Grebel map or something like that? Yeah, I don't know if that's what you mean. If that's the case, you can just start with a square or a flat plane. What do you do when your symmetry is bad? As in, if it's not symmetrical, you can delete symmetry. Let's say if I do this, for example, if your symmetry is all screwed up like that, you can just do mirror and well and just take this back to what it was. It was just gonna delete whatever you have on the positive side on the negative side. Negative side? Yeah, on the negative side. If you want to keep, let's say, let's see, if you want to keep the left hand side, so if you think the left hand side is better than the right hand side, if you do mirror and weld, it's just gonna do it automatically. But if you want to keep the right hand side, what you have to do is mirror first and then mirror and weld. What do you do when your symmetry is bad? That's the question that I just answered. Hopefully that answered the question. Agreeable to generate maps. I mean, I still don't know don't know what you mean. Do you mean like creating the maps, like having geometry and then bake that into a map, or what exactly? I'm a little bit lost with that. Sorry. I'm just gonna move faster to create the mask. So for the mask, we can start with this base mesh. And what I'll do is duplicate that entire base mesh, and I'm going to bring in the lasso. I'm just going to cut it here, maybe a little bit more. You know what? Because this is a duplicate, we can just subdivide it a few more times so that we have more resolution. Delete lower. We're not going to use all that. This is just to get that initial shape of the mask. All right. So I think that looks all right. And I'm going to bring in my little custom menu. I lost it. Here we go. Delete hidden, right? So for you guys would be on the geometry palette at the bottom, modify topology, delete hidden. So that's the one that I just did. So now I only have this piece, which is, if I turn visible or double, it's just this piece. So the first thing I want to do is fix this border before I do a quick series measure to start with the mask, right? So let me turn on polyframe. Hopefully this is going to work in terms of the smoothing because there's no another poly group. Let's see if that works. If not, I'll just show you something else. So polish on the deformation palette, polish by groups. Yep. So that is kind of what I would do first. Polish by groups, and that is just gonna make this like nice and straight. It's not deleting anything, it's actually just kind of pinching everything towards a straight line. If I go closer here and I smooth this out, you'll see they're still there. It's just that this polish by groups is just gonna crunch them together. Okay, so now that I have this as it is, it looks kind of like alright, but I have too much geometry and we have the problem, or not the problem, we have those polygons in the border kind of like weird looking in there. So I'll just do a quick series measure, a bit more. I'm gonna press the Alt key and click series measure. Oops, hang on a second, I lost my tool palette. Let's do it from here. Geometry, series measure. I'm gonna remove the adapt, click series measure, and I just want to have a cleaner topology. I'm gonna try the legacy series measure. Alright, so for organic stuff, I found that sometimes the legacy, the previous version, series measure 2.0, it is actually slightly better. But anyway, this is just the blocking or the base of this mask. We're gonna change this quite a bit in terms of topology. Let's go ahead and bring in the rest of the body. So let's get out of solo mode. And I'm going to take this move brush, center that, push it forward, and scale it up a bit. Okay, so this is going to be the mask. Something like that. The mask is actually quite rounded. Alright, and I'm just going to give it a bit of a gap between the mask itself so that it actually feels like a mask. Right, we can block it out a bit better because right now it's just a half a sphere really. So what I'll do is maybe I'm going to divide it a bit, a couple of times, and I'm going to select the move brush. And remember, I have the AccuCurve enabled. So if I do something like this, it's going to be very pointy. So I'm going to do the same thing by pushing it in like that. Alright, let's just try to find something a little bit more interesting maybe separating the eyes a bit more. I have to be careful with the masks, just because if I make the eyes of the mask too big in comparison to the eyes that I'm going to make on the body, then it looks like the pupils or the eyes are kind of like close together, so he looks like cross-eyed. I don't know, maybe that's something that will look okay. So this is something that I like to think about while I'm designing this, and I think we can start using some of the other tools, the sculpting tools, just to fine-tune this blocking. So I'm gonna bring in a clay brush, holding the Alt key. I'm gonna make something. Again, this is something that was vaguely described in the sketch that I did. So I'm gonna try to design as I go here. Kind of like an owl thing. Just giving a bit of volume, and this is all the clay brush, nothing else, and obviously the smooth brush to push things and to smooth things. Sorry. All right, I think something like that for the base is all right. I don't want too many details. Just gonna refine that line here a bit, and with the move brush, just tweaking these shapes a bit more. Right. Let's go ahead and divide it one more time. Again, this is just the blocking. We're not adding details just yet. I'm going to use the edge polish just to get a sharper set of planes here. And the same thing here for the top. And I think for the mask, I want to get like a surface that kind of mimics a bit the something that could be wood, maybe. We'll see how we go. All right, so that sounds, I mean, that looks all right for the beginning of this mask. We will do a little bit more details again, because this is such a feature piece that I reckon you will have a bit more presence. So one thing I want to do is just create the hole for the eyes, get rid of those. So I'm going to delete lower, go into solo mode, and probably what I'll do is this is something that I do before I delete things, because deleting things is an undoable operation. So here is something that you can do. You can hold the control key just to mask out an area. Actually, let's just divide this a couple more times, or one more time, so we have more resolution. So I like to do this just a mask, right? And then you can do Control W to assign a polygroup to that mask, turn on polygroups, and then you can go to turn off the line, so you only see, I mean, this one is not as easy to see. Let me just select that and give it a different color. There we go. So you have like an indication of the eyes, where the eyes would be. So if you're happy with this, then what we can do is bring in the deformation palette. I have it here, but I have it in my custom palette here, like polish by groups, but I'll just show you for you guys would be in the deformation palette. Again, polish by groups is gonna analyze the difference between the two polygroups, and it's gonna try to create a smoother line. So I'll do that before I delete. So polish by groups, you'll see it just smooth this quite a bit. If you don't want to use the smooth by groups, there's actually a really powerful smooth brush within the folder that comes with ZBrush. So you can go to Lightbox, just go back here, smooth brush, and it's called the conveniently, what is it? Yeah, smooth groups. So double click on that, you'll get these little pop-ups say, yeah, skip until the next. It's just replacing the smooth brush, the default one. So if I undo that, quick save. I don't know what I did there. All right. So if I hold smooth to do this, it's not gonna change the volumes too much. It's just gonna change the roughness of this line between the polygroups. So I can just do this without, and this is better manually to just do this to get a better looking eye, or more rounded eye for this mask. So I saw here in the chat, what does decreasing increasing the focal shift do? That is going to change the fade of the reach, the fade or the reach of the influence of the brush. So increasing it to make it closer to, I'll show you in a second, but I'm just going to answer Khalil questions. No booleans for the eyes. You could do booleans. I just think this one is faster because we have an open geometry. So you'll have a bit of a hard time trying to do booleans with an open geometry, really, especially when you create the booleans or when you get out of the visible, the preview mode. So let me just show you with a larger brush. Smooth this standard brush. So just to answer OMG, it is sacriple question. I don't know those names. So basically, this is the focal shift, right? So this inner circle is the focal shift. This is the size of the brush. The closer this circle is to the outer edge, the sharper, the less fade you will have in the brush, and the closer that this is towards the center, the more fade that you will have, basically. So what I mean by that in like practical terms, with the smooth brush, this is the standard effect of the brush. If I take the focal shift all the way up, like almost 100%, you'll see that the circle is very, very small, the reach. So it is very thin. I mean, there is a bit of a fade between the center point of the brush and the total amount of the size. And if I push it back, it's gonna be, you know, not fade at all. So that is what the focal shift does. Just gonna undo that. Was doing so with the move brush. Skin material, polyframe. So quick save again. Just stop mode, and I'm gonna be able to delete these polygons, or these polygroups, just by holding Control and Shift. Click on that, maybe invert that, and you'll see now that I have this hidden, I can simply go and delete hidden. So now we have a cleaner, a cleaner sketch. Then we can use a series of polygroups to further refine this a bit more. I'm not gonna do that just yet because I don't mind this amount of polygons, and I wanna do more details on this mask. So when we get to the sculpting part and doing more details like the polygrouped and what's the other one, panel loops, all the things that we plan in the sketch, we will do a retopology of this. But so far, I think it's looking all right. They're just little pieces that I would like to refine, but again, those are things that will get fixed once we get to once we fix the topology of this. Okay, so let's get out of solo mode. How are we with time? We still have time to do a few more things. Like I said, the clothes and the fur coat and all that, I think I will do that once I pose the character. So let's just concentrate on assets that we can create at this stage, at this T-pose. Let's have a look. So we've done the basics or the blockout of the mask, the horns. This is going to be later. I think we can do maybe this. You know what? This color is also going to be once it's posed. We can do something like, maybe let's do this. The kind of like the, how do you call it? The cane, I guess, and the fingers of the feet of the character. Maybe just do that. Yeah. All right. So we might have time to actually start posing the character a little bit, or maybe do some of the details of the head. I would like to create some sculpted details in the horns and the face before I pose the rest of the character, and the details for the body as well. So let's do that. One thing I can do is straight away select the body, go into the Gizmo 3D, bring in the cog icon and select flatten. where is it? Flatten. There we go. And with this one, I just want to flat these polygons here a little bit. So this is flattening, is not deleting anything. Alright. Accept. Then let's get closer here. We can smooth this a bit. Smooth this. And then with the move brush, just fine tune the shape of this. I forgot to enable symmetry. So let's just do mirror and weld, enable symmetry. There we go. So you just want to do a fine tuning of the overall shape with the move brush, nothing too crazy. Again, all of these will be fixed later, but I want to leave the blocking ready, or most of it ready before we move on. So today I reckon we will finish with that first pass of the blocking for this character. Alright. So the next thing I was gonna do, let's do the cane actually. So I'm gonna go back to what I had here, and let's see if I can reuse this or revert this somehow. I already baked kind of the. Actually, we have the undo history, so that is another good thing of working in like separate tools and then merging them together into a working tool. This is the horn, obviously. So what I can do is clone it, so that I can still have access to the entire. This is the horn. But then in this one that has the undo history, I can just go back a bit to something like that, right? And I can just rotate it around. Go to the accept. Go to the maybe scale it before anything, right? And what I'll do is play around with this area. I'm gonna hold the shift key. And I'm gonna smooth this corner, or this pointy bit. But then, as soon as I start smoothing, I'm gonna let go of all of the shift, and that is gonna create, or it's gonna access the alternative algorithm to inflate this point. Let's do it again. Right. And let's go ahead and bring in the gizmo cog icon. I'm gonna use another twist just to twist it a little bit more. Something like that. Accept. So that is looking good. Something else that we can do is use the soft deformer, and this is something that I really like, this soft deformer or deformer soft. If you click this, you'll get kind of like a lattice tool. So what I would like to do is just reduce the number in the z-axis and reduce the number in the x-axis with these cones, so we have a simpler box. And what this does, this lattice, is just creates a temporary or like a virtual box around the object with some points that if you move them around, like if I click here, it's just gonna move that part of the mesh. So that is super handy. So now that I have this, let's go ahead and in the y-axis, I'm gonna scale this up a bit. Down, so that we have a few more points, maybe one more. All right. And the way that this works is you can mask out different points that you don't want to touch. So I'm going to hold the control key, mask this out and mask this out. Actually going to change to the mask lasso, for me it's faster. And I'm going to select hang on a second. I just want to put the gizmo. There we go. So clear the mask first, just so that the gizmo is right in the center, and then I'm going to hold Control, Alt, and now I have this. I have everything but this mask, and then the gizmo is in the middle. So with this, I can just scale this down, like so, just to make it thinner, and then with the y-axis, I can scale it up. So this is how I envisioning, or how I imagine to be that little stick that the guy is holding. Let's call it a stick. And that's too much. All right. Clear the mask, and I'm going to mask these ones here, and I'm just going to reduce this a little bit, so you'll see how powerful this is. So now that this base shape is kind of like ready, we can go ahead and start masking some bits. Actually, another thing that is really good is that you can, in theory, increase the amount of points that you can edit without going back in time. Also, without having to redo the shape that you did. So if I create, no, it didn't work. So yeah, my bad. So you actually have to set the number of divisions before you edit them. But this one is good enough. So I'm gonna use this to tweak this a bit. Just so that it doesn't feel as manufactured. Alright, I think that looks good. Let's go ahead and click accept. And I feel that we can even twist it a bit more at the top. Right? So I think that's looking good. Let's go ahead and click accept. And again, we have to simply go to copy, go to our working tool, paste, select that, and just move it around. I mean, this is not a non-symmetrical object anyway, so it doesn't really matter where we put it. We'll have to sculpt it without symmetry regardless. I'm just gonna hold the Alt key and reposition this pivot, and I'm just gonna put it right here in the corner so that I can kind of like place this closer to the ground, and then I can just very easily just determine the height of it. So I think something like that. That's not too bad. I'm thinking we can use the move brush to just fine tune it a bit. Let's go into solo mode. Again, this is something that will be part of the sculpting once we get to it. Just as a quick block out of it. Just to make it a bit more interesting, give it a more of an intentional design to this. Cool. Alrighty, so we're getting there. What else we can do with the blocking? Let me see. I don't know if you guys have any questions so far about this guy. So in a Mr. Manson, in a stylized character such as this, such as this one, how do you deal with the anatomy? In this case, if I wanted to actually do it properly from the beginning, and if I know that at some point the character is not going to have clothes, or is going to take the clothes off or whatever, then I would pay more attention to the anatomy, and it's just a matter of, you know, relating the mechanics of the human anatomy or a creature really into it. So when you deal with a creature, you can reference, you know, any other animal really. Just reference the anatomy of any animal and just figure out how they work. But this character, it's a stylized character, but it has a humanoid form. So I would base the anatomy and how the mechanics of the body work based on a humanoid or a human anatomy really. So I will use heaps of reference if I wanted to detail it. But in this case, again, most of it is actually covered. So what I'll do is just do a bit of sculpting. Actually, before we do that, let's do the fingers, and after that we can spend the rest of the stream just finishing up some of the details of the body, just sculpting a bit of the landmarks of the anatomy, and that hopefully addresses that question a bit. So let's go ahead and do the fingers, and the fingers are going to be primitives and gizmo. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select a cube 3D, right? Initialize, and here in the initialize, what I want to do is actually rotate it. So I want this pointy bit, kind of like pointing towards the x-axis, z-axis actually. There we go. And then we can do the same thing we did with the horn. I'm gonna reduce the x and the y. This time I'm not gonna make it such an exaggerated shift in the scale. Just 50 should be fine. And I'm gonna reduce the side counts to 3. Okay, so it's kind of like a prisma thing. I think this will work. We'll see. And then we can take the V divide, the vertical divide, and just reduce that to 4 so that we don't have any of these loops. We will do the loops manually with the SymModeler, and then increase this, decrease this as well. Okay, I reckon that would be good. So in reality, all I did was just take a cube and modify it to create a prisma. Right, so Polymesh 3D. So now we have a normal, a polymesh that we can tweak. The first thing would be to scale this to the size of what I want the finger to be, or the claw, right? And I also want to rotate it because I can try to eyeball it. It's 75 degree what I need, or I can just go to the deformation palette and just type a number here. So rotate. I don't use this as often, so rotating the Z-axis. Yeah, so this is the one that I know, the one that I need. Click on that, 75 degrees. Yep, so that should do the trick. So now this is a flat angle here. Great. All right, now we can bring in the SymModeler. And I'm just going to right click on this, and I'm going to select bevel. Right click on the edge, select bevel, click and drag. Maybe around there. Actually, let's do it all the way, and then do one more here, and click here to do another one. And we can right click, insert multiple edge loops, and that will create one right in the middle if you don't drag. Okay, I feel that we might need a few more, and you know what, this is not proportional. I'm gonna undo what I did. Right click, delete, and there we go, and right click and insert, and this time you have 8, like a specified resolution of 8, and that should be good. Yeah, so that's much better. All right, now we have to do the same thing for the inside. Just add a right click, add an insert, but this time it's going to be just a single edge loop. Right click, something like that, and click once here to do the same. Cool. It doesn't matter that we have different polygroups at this point. And what I want to do is just subdivide this a little bit and play with the shape, and that should do the trick really. In fact, now that I think about it, we can take advantage of the tools in the SymModeler to just delete this. I'm gonna hold Alt and tag all these polygons. Right click on them and delete. Hang on a second, delete. So now we don't have anything in this area. And what I'll do is close this. This is a hole really, so close this hole, but I'm gonna extrude it a little bit with some, what I mean in just a second. So right click on the edge, and I'm gonna find the close holes. And it's the concave hole, I think. No, right click is the convex hole really, and the convex hole is the one that has a bunch of extra modifiers. So I'm going to start with spline, but probably arc and circle will work as well. And the way that this works is pretty cool. I'm going to click, and as soon as I click, it just closes the hole. But then I can, without releasing the click, I can just drag. I drag up and down. Up and down will add loops, and left and right will actually inflate that. So I'm going to just push that like so, just to establish the length, and then up and down to determine how many loops. So I think that's alright. There we go. So that's kind of another way that you can create this bullet. Alright, so this is going to be the finger. I'm going to bring in the move brush. This will make more sense in just a second. So I'm just going to push this. Hang on a second. Oh no. Wait. Get out of symmetry. I'm just going to push this forward. So this is not going to be symmetrical, but it doesn't matter. Cool. All right. I just want to have a bit of a pointy area here, and then we can divide this maybe a couple times, and then we have a softer corners here. To turn this off, right? And this is going to be the claw. So what I'll do is Actually, before I do that, there's always a before doing something. Anyway, I just want to hold Control and W to assign a single polygroup to it. I want to have a little bit of an indentation inside the claw or inside this nail, whatever. So what I'll do is hold the Alt key with the symmetric selector in all these areas, all these polygons, and holding Alt and clicking on the polygons is just going to assign a temporary polygroup. So I'll do something like that. I'm going to leave this one as it is. And now I can hover over this face, right click, and I'm going to click on the inset, right? So that's going to inset everything, and I'm just going to make sure that the target is, or the modifiers of the target is set to the region, not each polygon. So to the entire region that I just selected. Click and drag. This is actually a new polygroup. You cannot see it because it's kind of like the same color. So I can, without letting go of the click, I can hold Alt, and that should change the colors. So I'm just gonna give it a bit of a thickness. I guess that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm just gonna come closer here and refine this little bit. Just a bit of a smooth brush should fix that. Cool. Again, don't worry too much about the topology. It looks a little bit crap right now, but you know, we'll fix that later. So now that we have this, the next thing I would do, you know what? Let's do another insertion or another inset of that area. So C modeler, right click, inset, and right click. I'm gonna make sure that the target is set to polygroup all. So I'm gonna perform the inset action, but the polygroup all is gonna tell ZBrush to only use this polygroup or whatever polygroup that I click on it first. So let's click on that and just do something like this. That's fine. Right click on it, on the polygon, click mesh, polygroup all or Q mesh, and this is the one that allows us to extrude. Or if you click to push this in, which is kind of like what I want, but we already created a polygroup for this. So I'm going to hold the Shift key, and that is just going to move it. So I'm going to push this in a bit like that, and it's probably going through, it's almost going through here. So now that I push this in, I'm going to hold, right click on that, Q mesh, scale, and I'm going to scale polygon center, making sure that the polygroup all is selected, so I don't only do it, it only does it to this polygroup. So click on that just to scale it a bit. Alright, so hopefully you'll see what I'm trying to do here with this shape. Right, so now I don't care about the polygroups, but we just leave it like that. Divide this a couple of times. There we go. We can make this sharper if you want, but I think this is looking good. Yeah, that looks alright. We can actually bring in the move brush and the smooth brush and just smooth this a bit. Alright, and also let's go and inflate this part because it's getting a little bit too thin for my taste. Cool. So we have this weird shape. This is kind of like setting up the blocking of the blocking. So we have the base of this, and then we can bring in the gizmo and bring in the arc or the bend arc. Sorry, let's go back and delete lower. And now we can go to bend arc and use this green one to do this type of thing. So before that, actually, let's use not the bend arc, let's use the taper just to get this a bit closer to what I want. Actually, this doesn't look too bad, but let's just go for the more natural feel. So it's a bit thicker towards the end and a bit thinner here. I actually want this to have a bit more of a bulging in this area, so we can use this wide one to move the taper effect or the radius of it. So if I click this, you'll see how it changes. So I'm just gonna do something like that. Click accept. It's very barely noticeable what I just did. But then I'm gonna bring in the soft deformer that we used before, and I'm going to reset this to 0, or well, the normal amount, and I'm gonna increase the Z one to only maybe 3, And let's go ahead and do the same thing we did for that stick, right? So I'm going to scale this up. Oops. Clear the mask, and I'm just going to use this center one. Scale that up. So those ones are very subtle changes, what I'm doing here. Accept. Alright, so that's looking better. So now we can use the bend arc. Right, so that is kind of what I wanted. It looks pretty blocky and not very organic, but again, this is just the beginning of it. We haven't done the sculpting part. Let's click accept, and we can just use the move brush just to refine the shapes a bit here. Okay, and we deleted the geometry, or deleted the subdivision level, but because this is such a clean geometry, and we all we did was deleting the previous subdivision level, we can easily go back to reconstruct subdivision level. So we can click on this a couple of times, and that will just send us back to what we had, right? And we have this subdivision level if we needed to, which for the time being I'm just gonna keep it. Cool. Let's go to the subdivision, subtool palette, subpalette, copy that, go to our working tool, paste it. Oh, so it was rotated, that's why the symmetry wasn't working. Let's go click on that, and I'm just gonna position these. You know what, before I do anything, let's duplicate that, put one of these copies into the originals, so now we have that in case we screw this up. And then let's scale this one. So I'm just gonna take my gizmo, and I'm gonna hold the Alt key, and I'm gonna position these right there, so now it's gonna be easier to rotate and scale and all that. So I'm gonna scale these, and I'm gonna do all the work in the right hand side of the character, so then I can just mirror and weld. Okay, so that should give you an idea of what I was trying to do with all those steps. Okay, maybe a little bit longer. Cool, and I'm going to hold the control key and whoops, I'm going to have to delete. Come on, delete higher. There we go. Hold control, click and drag to duplicate. This one is going to be a little bit shorter, smaller. Okay, so we get in there with the blocking of this creature. I'm going to hold control and click and drag that. So holding control, clicking and dragging is just duplicating these within the same subtool, and that is my idea with this. All right. So I'm not paying too much attention to the actual hand. I just wanna. I'm more concerned about the relationship between the different fingers and the position of them, and the rotation and all that. And then I can just take the move brush and fix the hand a bit. Cool. Control click and drag to delete the mask. There we go. So we have something similar to, or closer to what I wanted for this character. Another thing we can do is obviously mirror and weld. So now we have it in both sides. So we get in there. I'm going to click on the body. And how are we with time? We have about 10 minutes. So I'm just going to tweak this hand a little bit. And then hopefully, I mean, if you have any questions, maybe I can just take some time to answer any questions or explain something that might not be too clear, that I rushed, and we'll leave it there. Save, come on, quick save. I don't know what I did here. Just keep clicking things. I don't know I don't know what I'm doing. All right. We don't have enough geometry here to properly describe all these forms, but again, for the time being and the blocking, this should be enough. This should suffice. I'm thinking that maybe the thumb is too close. So what I'll do is select this subtool, and I'm gonna go into solo, isolate these, control click anywhere to mask it, invert the mask, bring everything together, bring the gizmo. I'm just gonna push it. So the rotation is bothering me a little bit, and it's too long. All right. Not sure if I like this. I'm just gonna push this with the move brush. All right, something like that. Clear my mask. Go back to the body. Cool. So that is, I think that is a little bit better for the hand. Again, once we get to sculpting, we will tweak all these, but just want to set it in place. All right, so that is looking good. We have to do the feet really quickly. Something we can do, this is just to show you a different process, I guess. I'm just gonna do another quick save. Click on, know what I'm doing. Append. So what I want to do is append. So that for you guys should be within the subtool subpalette. Append a sphere. Right. So that sphere, we can just turn that into a Dynamesh. Just chuck it in here. So that is going to be kind of like the same thing as the fingers, but with a different process here. Let's just do it on the side so you can see better. So I'm going to use the deformers to bend this a bit to get this type of thing. Then I'm going to use taper to make it pointy. Accept that. I'm going to scale that in the x-axis, like so. That's kind of good. And then I'm going to bring in the flatten. Just push that up, maybe a bit more. Click OK. Accept. Scale that up. Oh, not too much. All right. So hopefully you'll see what I'm trying to do. Zolo, and then I'm just going to push these, and from here we can just hold Control W to make sure that this is just a single polygroup, and from here we're going to create those kind of like three fingers, but for the feet that are closer together, just making kind of like a hoof or something like that. Let's see. What was I gonna do? I forgot. Slice, right? So if you hold Control and Shift, you can access the selection tools. Just click on. I have it here, but for you guys, it should be this one. Slice curve. So I'm gonna click on this. Control and Shift, click and drag, and you create this little line, right? If you hold the Alt key anywhere, it's just gonna create like a point to bend that curve. So I'm just gonna target this point here, hold the Alt key once, and now you'll see that point allows me to bend that curve. So I'll do something like that. Now let's just do it again. I'm gonna start here, Alt and Alt. So I just want to create like a curve like this. There we go. And all I'm doing is just slicing this. It's not cutting the geometry, it's just creating kind of like a polygroup with a slice line. Let's do the same thing here. By the way, if you want to relocate these before you let go, you can press the spacebar without letting go of the click. So you can reposition this entire curve. So I'm going to let go there. So now I have three polygroups, which is really good. So what I want to do with these three polygroups is kind of like the process that I'm going to use for some parts of the mask. which if you go to geometry, edge loop here, you can click this panel loop. Just make sure that double is enabled so that it actually creates geometry underneath. That's kind of like hard to explain without actually showing what I'm doing. Yeah, let's just click panel loops. So hopefully you'll see what it does. This double, what it does is if I just smooth all this, hold shift, and I'm going to select this standard smooth brush. Hang on. S, smooth, stronger, smooth brush. There we go. So now I can just do this, tap, and you'll see it is hollow. So that's something that we're gonna do for the mask. But actually, this is not what I want. So I'm not gonna use panel loops. What I'll do instead is split groups. So I'm going to selecting this hoof, this whatever this is, and I'm gonna click on split and split groups. So it's gonna split it in 3 groups because we have 3 polygroups. Click OK. So now we have these three parts. So what I'll want to do is, you'll see this is just an empty thing. I'm just going to run a Dynamesh for each one of those. So hold Control. Dynamesh is enabled because we started with Dynamesh. So hold Control, click and drag, and that does this. But we need more resolution, so I'm going to increase that a bit. Control, click and drag. There we go. The next one. Control, click and drag. The next one. Oops. Let's go back one. More resolution as well, because there's different subtools. The resolution is now independent. Control, click and drag. Alright, so now that we have these different ones, what we can do is merge them all together. Back again. So click on merge. I'm going to merge down, and I click OK, and merge down, click OK. So that's one way to do it. So now we have kind of like geometry within it, right? So if I go and polish everything, or if I smooth, I have a custom macro here that's going to smooth these 5 times. So I'm going to click here. So you'll see it smooth everything quite a bit. Maybe another go. Right. There's some weird polygons here. So I'm going to undo these quite a bit. So before I do the smoothing, I'm gonna select this one that's giving me the errors. They're kind of like the same thing. Alright, I'm just gonna run a Dynamesh. Whoops, not Dynamesh. What am I doing? Let's just clean this up really quickly with the C remesher. I'm just gonna click remesher, and this is gonna give me something a little bit more decent to work with. Something I want to do actually before I do that, I'm spending way too much time on this. So if I want to clean this up a little bit, but I don't want to have all these weird stranded polygons, we can use the same technique that I use for the mask, as in using the smooth by groups. So that's going to create a sharper line between the groups. Smooth by groups, right? So now we have a sharper line here, and in the ZBrush palette, I have to sort of finish up right now, so let's do it quickly. So I'm gonna click keep groups, and that's just gonna try to keep all the groups that we did, and click ZBrush. So these lines are gonna be rather sharp, and I think this is much better. Let's smooth everything a bit. There we go. So that is kind of like what I was trying to do from the beginning. It took a long time, but there we go. Now that we have this kind of like separate, we can maybe just do a clay polish just to sharpen things a bit and split them apart as well. And then I'm going to use the move brush with the AccuCurve, and I can actually group everything. So auto group, so that we have 3 groups, and then we can enable the mask by polygroup, so that whatever I click first, it's just gonna click on that, or it's just gonna move that. And for you guys, the mask by polygroups should be under the brush palette, auto masking, this one. So mask by polygroups to 100. Right. So I'm gonna take this forward a bit. So all I want to do here is kind of break that symmetry apart a bit. There we go. Turn that off. Just refine this a bit more. Again, this could be like a good blockout for the initial geometry that we can use for this part, but you know, it will change as we progress. So like I said, this might be something that we'll do in a couple of streams, or maybe three or more. Just want to show you different techniques. Cool. So this hoof that took about 20 minutes to do. Let's get out of solo mode. Turn this off. Bring in the gizmo. I'm just gonna center that, right? And I'm just gonna place this. Ooh, what happened there? I think I have some masking, clear mask. There we go. Scale that. Right, and I'm just gonna rotate it so it's more natural. All right, so something like that. I think it's not too bad. They're just tiny feet, maybe too tiny. All right, so that's part of the the designing process and fine-tuning things right from the 3D, just from my ZBrush. I'm gonna do a mirror and well just to have it in there. And again, because the geometry should be rather clean, I can try to do a reconstruct subdivision level. Let's do a quick save before that, just in case. Not that it's gonna crash or anything, but it might not do it properly. Yeah, the mesh contains triangles, so something you can try to do is do another series measure and just reconstruct that. Didn't do it. Anyway, the series measure is pretty good. Alright, so I'm gonna select the body, and again I'm just gonna try to place this a little bit better. Cool. I can see that it's going through this. I'm just going to push this like so. Alright, so that's looking better. Alright, so I'm going to just check the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in there. I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. I think I'm happy with this kind of like first pass of the blocking of this guy. And in the next stream, what we can do is tackle some other stuff, like I think for the most part the blocking part is done. So what we can do is start detailing and sculpting and adding all the patterns of the mask that I want to do. Detail the horn and everything. So it's going to be more sculpting. And if we have time, we start with the posing. And probably we need another stream to once we have the posing and all the details and all the geometry that we're going to use, then we can start working on the fiber mesh, all the clothes and stuff like that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what to expect. Let's have a look. Admiral Supernova, he's asking, should you always model them naked and the clothes and then the clothes on them and then clothe them? Yes. I think just correct me if I'm wrong with this question. You're asking if you should model everything kind of like separate, and then like if you have clothes, then you put it on top. If that is the case, yeah, I would do that. Even if it is for like a game character that's gonna have clothes in a single mesh, I would still model everything separately, and then just do the topology as part of the single mesh, if that makes any sense. Who made your reference? The little sketch is just something that I put together just before the stream, just to have it's more than a reference. It's just an idea that I just wanted to put on paper to show you guys what I'm thinking of making. But The reference is just, a bunch of things that I've seen on the internet, nothing specific. Is there any difference between extrude and QMesh? Yeah, the difference between QMesh and extrude just does that operation as it sounds, it extrudes. The QMesh, I think it stands for quick mesh, and the quick mesh allows you to have a bunch of extra operations like moving things and scale. Let me just show you the difference really quickly. This is really the difference between the QMesh, the QMesh and extrude. So if I hover this face and I click on extrude, right, and I'm gonna select just a single polygon, right? If I click this is the action what you would expect, right? And then you can just do more and so on, and then you can just smooth all this, but that is kind of like the way that you do, or the way that you use the extrude. If I undo that and I'm gonna use the QMesh. So the QMesh is slightly different because you have additional operation. That's why it's called QMesh. I think it stands for quick mesh, but I might be wrong. So the quick mesh or QMesh allows you to do the same thing, exactly the same thing. But for example, here it just snaps directly to this other polygroup. So now this is connected, right? Something else that you can do with the QMesh is extrude this, but then extrude, and as you extrude, you can hold the Control key, and then that separates that little polygon, so that extract that polygon, or you can hold Shift, and that actually moves the face. So that's really the difference. Your series streams end too fast. Make it 3 hours. I would if I had the time and we could do it. I would. Why not just use the polish feature? I think that question was for the feed, or the close for the feed. You can do that as well. ¿Qué modeladores hablan español en Pixologic? Magnus is asking who speaks Spanish that works in Pixologic, or that streams in Pixologic. I'm not sure. From the top of my head, I'd say, well, I do, but I don't do the Spanish streams. I might do one in the future. Why not? But from the top of my head, Oscar Trejo from Mexico, and Jose Rosales as well from Mexico. They do streams in Spanish if you're interested. Okay, so we're gonna leave it there, guys. This is kind of like the blocking, what we did today of this creature. Hopefully you learn a couple of things, or at least was an entertaining process. And yeah, for the next time, the next week. Next week's already. Is it the next month already? I'm so lost in the calendar. Oh no, so we're still in May. So yeah, next week, the 31st for me, for the 31st, the 30 for some of you guys. We'll continue with this, and we start more the sculpting process, and I will show you some other techniques, right? By the way, you use ZBrush every day, the sculpt and modeling? Yes, almost every day, I would say. It's like my primary tool of creating, all the projects. I in some way or another, I might use ZBrush. So I would say, if not every day, at least 3 or 4 times a week, I'm using ZBrush. 3 days a week, just to be on the safe side. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I'll think about doing the streaming in Spanish for maybe if next month. I'll speak with Kyle and see if we can do like a split of English and Spanish, depending on how much time, because I'm about to start with some big projects that I have coming up. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, like I've seen some new people here today. Just want to make sure that you are aware of this, which is the compositing guide. So if you go to the ZBrush guides, to the ZBrush guides, you can go to the sheet for compositing, and this is a quick yeah, just a quick guide in PDF that shows you how to composite this guy. So this is the final image. You can go ahead and download it. It's free, and it comes with the PSD files, everything ready for you, so that you can recreate this, or you can recreate the same process for your characters. And it's pretty straightforward once you learn it. There are only 7 steps to get to this point, and it is a non-destructive workflow. So you can go from this finish or this look to this one in just a few layers. So this is the quick start, the quick cheat sheet to compositing. So you can just click on this to download it. But this guide, for those of you who already got it, so if you go to this, the cheat sheet for compositing within the ZBrush guides, this latest tutorial, it has some extra tips that I talked about in previous streams. So here you have a link, I think here, yeah, here you have a link to episode 12, so that's 2 episodes ago, I think, or last episode. And I'll walk you through how to set up this type of material blending in ZBrush 2019. Yep, so you can just grab it from here. And again, for those of you who haven't got it, I shared on an email for those of you who are in part of my newsletter. So I shared on an email these material shading. So it's just a single BPR filter or a set of filters that you can load into ZBrush, and it will give you access to all of these materials, which are pre-made from ZBrush, or I mean, they come with ZBrush. So when you do a single render, you will have all the materials already in this filter, so that you can just export the shaded version, the composite version of all these materials, so that you can continue with the guide. So that's just an extra thing. I'll leave it there, guys. Hopefully that is useful for some of you. Thank you very much for being here, and it's been a great couple of hours, and I look forward to seeing you next week. All right. Hang on a second. There's a question. Can you ZBrush make normal maps? Yeah, absolutely. Once you have a high resolution mesh and a low resolution mesh, you can go to hang on, normal map here, and then just create a normal map. So yeah, absolutely. All right. Cool. Thank you so much, guys, and appreciate you stopping by and hanging around. I'll see you guys next week, and hopefully we can do something that looks, I mean, we take this one to the next level and make it a little bit more interesting. All right. See you guys next time. Cheers.